We usually map reality using a binary of good versus evil, order versus chaos. This map often fails. When opposing forces collide in a fight for total dominance, the result is mutual annihilation. To build an accurate map, we can look at the underlying mechanics. What we call order is a centripetal force, a structural containment that defines boundaries and holds a system together. Rebellion acts as a centrifugal force. It pushes outward against those boundaries. In engineering terms, this outward pressure serves as a necessary stress test for the structure. Remove either force and the system fails. Structural containment without adversarial testing decays into a rigid beam. It becomes sterile, inflexible, and trapped in the stasis of robot dogma. Outward rebellion without a structural anchor dissolves into nihilistic entropy. The system fractures until it scatters into useless noise. This creates the reactionary rascal. This is the individual who believes they are fighting the system, unaware that their entire behavioral loop is a predictable reflex dictated by the very dogma they oppose. True sovereignty emerges from a third state. It requires both forces to function simultaneously. A gyroscope uses the tension of opposing forces. The outward centrifugal pull and inward centripetal anchor work against each other, mathematically canceling gravity, allowing the mechanism to stand upright. Stability is not achieved by eradicating the adversary. It is engineered by successfully synthesizing structural containment with a relentless internal stress test. Historical analysis shows that humanity originally understood adversarial forces through this functional lens, long before they were mythologized as a cosmic evil. In the ancient Tanakh, Hasatan functions as a bureaucratic title, the prosecuting attorney. It served as a quality control protocol within the divine council. The prosecutor's role was structural auditing. By applying pressure to human integrity, the protocol ensured the system could withstand reality. Contrast this diagnostic test with the ontological breach described in the Book of Enoch. Here, 200 celestial watchers descend onto Mount Hermon, crossing the boundary into the human domain. The Watchers abandoned their role as systemic auditors. They injected premature, high-level celestial knowledge into a human culture that lacked the maturity to process it. The consequence of this unintegrated data was runaway entropy. It manifested as the Nephilim, a hybrid race that devoured human sustenance and flesh, corrupting the earth through weaponization and vanity. By the 17th century, the cultural narrative regarding the adversary underwent a final literary shift in the work of John Milton. Milton blended the Enoch tradition with the legend of the sons of Seth, transforming the adversary into a defiant, tragic hero. By giving the fallen angel the most compelling dialogue in English literature, he provided the blueprint for the modern romantic rebel. This mutation of a vital system check into a myth of romanticized rebellion broke our conceptual flexibility. We lost the ability to self-regulate, treating every internal diagnostic as a threat to be destroyed. Modern neuroscience suggests this societal drift toward rigidity stems from a systemic neurological imbalance. Psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist models reality through two distinct hemispheric modes. The right hemisphere, or state zero, acts as the master. The master processes the living context, the implicit, the metaphoric, and the interconnected whole. It maintains a permeable connection to the environment as a whole. The left hemisphere, or state 1, functions as the emissary. The emissary's domain is abstraction. It takes the living context and breaks it down into fragmented, utilitarian maps, categorizing reality into isolated, manageable boxes. The hierarchy is designed for the emissary to report back to the master. In our current intellectual landscape, this has inverted. The emissary severs the connection and attempts to run the system alone. This creates a closed psychological loop. Without the right hemisphere's broader context, the individual mistakes the rigid, dead map of reality for the living territory itself. An unchecked emissary causes institutions to calcify. Flexible systems freeze into jagged, crystalline structures that cannot adapt to new information. The bureaucratic stagnation of the modern world is a symptom of a left-brain dominant operating system. It is a failure of biological balance rather than a failure of policy. If a neurological system becomes trapped in an analytical loop, it requires a circuit breaker to force a reboot. Historically, human culture utilized the archetype of the holy fool, the Byzantine Solos or the Russian Eurydice, to provide this disruption. They used intentional, simulated madness to break social decorum and moral blueprints. By violating the rigid rules of the render, they forced the collective back into contact with raw potentiality. Philosopher Alan Watts operated as a modern variation of this Zen rascal archetype. Watts often used absurdity to expose rigid thinking. He once held a serious, pseudo-Japanese conversation with a butterfly that refused to land on his hand, then treated the rejection with perfect solemnity. His trademark body-shaking belly laugh functioned as a calculated mechanism. It forced his audience to suddenly drop their intellectual assumptions and experience the immediate, unrendered moment. This absurdity stalls the left hemisphere's analytical engine. Because binary logic cannot solve an unsolvable paradox, the brain is forced to shift its attention to the right hemisphere. The holy fool acts as a sovereign bridge. They break the illusion of the rendered system to force a direct reconnection with the source code of reality. Bringing these disciplines together provides the mathematics of self-governance. We calculate this through the formula 1 + 1 = 3. The first one is the structural knowledge generated by the emissary. It is the necessary boundary of articulated order. The second one is the adversarial disruption and contextual awareness provided by the master. Synthesizing these forces generates the 3, the sovereign self. This is a new reality that is greater than the sum of its fragmented parts. This state of dynamic balance exposes the illusion of static peace. Stillness without purpose leads to fragility. The system requires continuous motion and tension to stay upright. Maintaining this requires an active boundary audit. You must deploy your own internal quality control to stress test your dogmas and question your rigid assumptions. The natural instinct is to seek comfort by attacking parts of the unified system, but a hand cannot find comfort by cutting off its own fingers. Reject rigid dogma and reactionary nihilism alike. Demand the continuous evolution of your mind by maintaining the active readiness of the sovereign gyroscope.